Now, the shareholder was coming up for sale, so it was a jointly owned business by the owner who'd set it up and HSBC who'd come together. And they were now getting ready to prepare the business for a sale. And actually, they knew what the price of the business was. But in terms of putting in those best practices, they were able to demand a higher price. So one of the things in terms of somebody who was going to invest in that was not going to just look at the financial figures of what are your revenues, what are your profits, etc., and what is your technical capability. People now starting to say, okay, and what are your HR practices? And by ensuring, making that investment, and it was absolutely purely for that investment purpose, that HSBC had called us in to make sure there was a fair evaluation process, job grading, policy, etc., equity in pay. Because actually, who was going to think twice, perhaps, around investing in a company that didn't have good HR practices? So that one, I think, is the closest one I can give you an example of in terms of directly impacting the price of the sale of that company. So
how do you measure it? I mean,
at that point,
I agree with everything you said.
yeah, I think obviously before and after, if there's certain intervention. So I think they knew what the price, or to actually, that may not have shifted an actual share value price, but actually it may have sealed the sale. So that I think is a big, considerable implication that we need to think about. So does it actually, were the people buying this had two options on the table, and which one was going to convince them to go with this, and the reasons why? But I think you're right. Sorry, I would like to say, I think, and this is why I also had that point on the screen that said, think of innovative, creative ways on how you measure. What are you trying to make the difference to? And therefore, if you're trying to make a difference in employee satisfaction, for example, or in shareholder value, for example, what is it you need to do that you can measure before and after, perhaps? But you're right, it's not, but we need to start thinking about that for our organizations, our business, to appreciate that there is a value add aspect there.
Thank you, Asma. Sorry, just to add to what Asma is saying, I think there will be some of quantifiable measures which we can define. One would be, perhaps could be, the market share of the product before the initiative and market share after the initiative. And then also, if you go a step further, the market growth and the growth of the company and growth of the competitors. And these are very quantifiable numbers. And you see, if the company has grown faster than the competitors, then perhaps there is something different happening here. And it could be the value added, and you can make a linkage as you go into detailed worksheets, linkage of exactly how the employees were trained to sell more, how the employees were provided the product knowledge and the capability to pierce into new market areas where your presence was not there. So in a detailed plan, now with 360-degree evaluation and everything else, you can bring in some value which can help quantify. It will never be 100% thing, there's a lot of things, but it gives you a good sense of whether there is a value addition from HR towards the market.
Great, thank you. May I request you, questions are second speaker ke baad we may have more questions. Thank you, Asma. A value added, I think, knowledge of 22 year experience, steering the business by HR, very tough task because HR people are normally known as soft people. Just to add a few lines, does the firm possess the advantages that will translate into profits? I think these are the main things which HR need to understand and to work on it. And is the business environment that is feasible, that we can turn these advantages into profit? And as Zafar Sahab says, there are methods, there are ways, and as Asma shared 4 or 5 very practical examples on that. Before heading to my next speaker, just a quick interesting thing to share, so that to keep more people alive here. Once there were 2 friends, and one was beaten very furiously. And the case went to the court. And when the judge saw the person who was beaten, he was just furious on the person who was the victim. He asked the culprit, "Why did you beat him?" And you see, he has just lost all his architecture. You have been very furious. The culprit said that he called me hippopotamus. Then what? The judge asked, "Kab kaha tha isne?" He said, 10 years back. And when you did beat him? He said, 1 week back. Why? Because I saw hippopotamus 1 week back. And I was just furious. He said me like this. And I term my thing like this, that I take things in a different way, and when actual hippopotamus comes in the picture with this different experience and things, I suddenly saw, oh God, my hippopotamus was very different. My next speaker is a CEO of a company. He is CEO of Hubco and board member of Capco. The topic is very interesting, leading the change. May I request Mr. Venus Harris, please, sir. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and assalamu alaikum. For those outside of Karachi, welcome to a pretty exciting city. Never a dull moment. However, the events are sad, and I think Pakistan in the last week has had one of the most difficult weeks in its history. But look, there's still a lot of energy and a lot of determination, and I'm pretty impressed with the people here. Something's not working on this. I didn't touch it. Okay, to move on. Well, I'm going to use Asma's trick, come down to the floor, partly because if I sit up there, I can't see the screen. Now, I brought a little tool with me because I can't do this on my own because I'm not really an HR professional. Now, you might think this is a kiddie's toy, but it's not. It's a snooze detector. And when somebody's snoozing, it flashes. Oh! There's a lot of snoozing going on. You've actually got a hard job. You've been here an hour, sat down. It's quite difficult. Ladies and gentlemen, do something for me, please. Would you stand up? This is going to be disruptive. Not too difficult. And would you please do one circuit round your table? And those that haven't got a table, just walk around. So please do one circuit round the table for me. That's excellent. Only problem is, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, you went the wrong way round. Could you please go the other way round? That's better. That was the way I had intended. Please feel free to sit down now. Now tell me, don't you feel invigorated now? Yeah? And I've just given you a lesson in how to lead change. Okay? So that's me done. I am also can be assured that you're at least awake now. I shall leave my snooze detector around. It might pick up one or two signals in a few minutes, perhaps. Okay. Well, don't worry. I'm not going to bore you about telling you much about Hubco. Next slide, please. But there it is. That's what Hubco at the moment is all about. Pretty large power station, still one of the largest foreign investments in Pakistan at $1.6 billion. It operates pretty much at or above world-class conditions in terms of performance, outperforming any other power plant in Pakistan in its class, in fact many others around the world. Despite being caught up in the unfortunate circular debt where we're owed currently 70 billion rupees, which is a rather lot of money. With the support of both the domestic and international investors, we're currently actually in the construction of 2 new power plants. So there's an expansion of our business and new investments going in. And that's basically 100% ownership of Narowal, north of Lahore in Punjab, which is a 225 megawatt plant, oil-fired. And also we have a 75% ownership of the first ever private hydel in Pakistan in AJK, which is literally downstream of the Mangla Dam. In fact, it's called New Bong Mangla. We support thousands of local people in the community in full health care, provision of ambulances and eye clinics, supporting the uplift of school, and probably the sort of things that you probably would expect a company like Hubco to do now. And we encourage other companies to do the same in support of the government's action to uplift the lives of people. And this is particularly difficult in Balochistan. And in fact, I've got Leslie Middlecote here and colleague Hussein from Leslie's our HR manager, and she's been very much behind this. We plan to replicate this approach with our new investments as well. So at Al Araib, in AJK, and in Narrowell, we'll be making the same approach. Because you can't bring these sort of investments to local neighbourhoods, particularly in rural areas, and not expect the local people to gain in some way, because you're disrupting their lives, that's for sure. We also make representations to other Pakistan donors and potential investors by really trying to calibrate some of the negative images that Pakistan sort of is represented through the media that they find so enticing to depict. So the country has so many, in my view, positive and good news stories to tell, but the media often dismisses these in preference to the more sensational shock and shame reports, which unfortunately is going on right now. So if you've got a good news story, very difficult to get that into the media. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but that is really just the dimensions of what I'm talking about. So a very serious company with serious investors, with very serious overseas investors as well as domestic investors. And despite all that's going on, that plant is doing a very good job at the moment. It's running around about 80% of its capability, which if you deduct from that the time it needs for maintenance and what have you, that's very close to the limit. It's just producing electricity non-stop. Next slide, please. It's going to be this. This next slide is simply to relate to the fact that we do act as a model. So we try and work with Pakistan, the government, and in fact we have a formal role with the Board of Investment, particularly in regard to the UK, but not just the UK, in sending out the message. Because frankly, we're in an industry where we have no competition, which is interesting really, because the way the contracts are arranged, Capco and the other projects, they're not a competition to us because Pakistan doesn't yet have a market, and frankly, it's not going to have a market for some time because it's too big a job to do. So we're very much on the world stage trying to represent the good side of Pakistan, but to tell the truth as well, but to represent what can be achieved. Next slide, please. Hope you won't be offended by this, but this is an American invention. Of course, they need it, but there's no Americans here. Now, you'll come across a lot of experts, okay? And I don't pretend to be an expert. But my view is if you come across somebody who says they're an expert in change management and leadership and all of that, you probably need one of these, okay? I think they're for sale outside the door. And to give you an example, I mean, how many financial experts are there in the world? And what a mess we're in. What a mess we're in. So all I'm saying is, you have to make your own judgment as to the sort of things that you hear. Okay, next slide, please. I'd like to share with you my personal thesis. And I think, personally, this is my guide. And that is that, living with change and uncertainty. In order to succeed and flourish, we need to prepare ourselves so that we're individually inherently capable of dealing with uncertainty and the unknown. Now, from here on through this little journey for a few minutes that I'm with you, keep this in your mind and on the other slides, both for yourselves individually, because I know some of you are real